I've been thinking about how to describe USC's 38-20 loss at home to UCLA, and all I can keep coming up with is utterly uninspiring and utterly disappointing.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching this show on YouTube or wherever you download your podcast, this show is free, and I really do appreciate your support. You can show your appreciation if you're watching on YouTube. Become a subscriber. It's quick, it's easy, it's free. Just click that red subscribe button. When you see that thumbs up, dude, smash it. Everybody wants to smash a thumbs up and hit that bell notification. That way you will not miss one episode, including these post-game reactions. So there's not many times where I want to question the effort of the players out on the field. But after what I watched, literally not too long ago, I'm questioning the effort by the players on the field. And I'm also questioning how much effort the coaching staff put into their game plan. I think I'm probably leaning more towards that. I'm going to ask the question that every single USC fan who watched that debacle. What was that? The way USC came out on offense and literally looked like UCLA on offense, that was utterly disappointing. At the end of the first quarter, it was 14-0 UCLA. And the Trojans, they looked like they could not even care any less. I'm watching from the press box. I'm wondering, do they know that this is a rivalry game? Do they know this is their last regular season game of the year? Do they care? And thank God UCLA does not have a good quarterback. Because if UCLA quarterback Ethan Garbers knew how to throw a good ball to his wide open wide receivers, that 38-20 final score is much, much, much worse. I don't even want to go down that path. Even when USC cut the score to 14-7, I don't know about you, I never got the sense that they were actually in the game. I mean, that touchdown from Caleb Williams to Brendan Rice for 74 yards, I don't believe that's how they drew it up in the huddle. I just don't. Not when Caleb Williams is falling backwards, throwing it off of 1 foot. And it's a 50-50 ball. Brendan Rice went up, he got it, and then he ran for 50. So there you go. It was just, it was a hard game to watch. And I'm going to say it again. I'm going to pat myself on the back right now. I might not be the smartest person in the room. Rarely am I. However, I think I have a pretty good idea of when something looks good and when something looks bad and when something looks like it doesn't have any idea what it wants to do or what it's supposed to do. Caleb Williams looked good. Wasn't his greatest performance, but he's working with what he has. The rest of the USC offense looks bad, and it's because they don't know what they want to do. And that's why I asked Lincoln Riley after the Arizona game, what was that, game 5? What is this team's offensive identity? Back then, as he was halfway out of his seat walking out of the press conference, he said, I was told, as well as the rest of the media, we're the number 1 scoring offense in the country. I think that's who we are. Well, after the 12th game of the season against your rival UCLA, this is your offensive identity. It's Caleb Williams that plays behind a distressed offensive line and a running game that barely produced 3 yards on the ground against the Bruins. And a whole bunch of play calling that leaves many, including myself, just sitting there scratching my head, saying, why did they do that? And then the follow-up question, why are they taking so long to do that? When USC did move the ball against UCLA's really good defense, it's because they were doing it with tempo. and with quick calls at the line of scrimmage. And when they weren't turning the ball over. Once again, the play clock was USC's worst enemy. Well, UCLA's defense was number one. The play calling and their use of the play clock was their second worst enemy. I mentioned the Trojans' distressed offensive line. Well, they gave up 4 sacks. What about the Bruins? They were getting pressure with 3 guys. Maybe a 4th guy would come every now and then. But that right side of USC's offensive line, they were getting destroyed. It was not pretty. Oh, and that distressed offensive line for USC, they had, I believe, at least 4 of USC's 6 penalties as a team. At least 4. And that USC's La Victoria red zone was more of a no-scoring zone. No matter what play Lincoln Riley dialed up or tried to dial up. I think he was using a rotary phone because that's how long it took to get the play in. UCLA, they had it covered. Literally, they had it covered. I can't remember a wide receiver running open. I mean, there were on an occasion when they ran a slant. But for the most part, UCLA's defense knew what was coming. I'm going to have more on the offense when I break down the game more in depth on Monday's episode. However, for this post-game reaction, let me just summarize USC's offense and say they played their worst game of the season, and it almost felt like, as you were watching it, that it didn't matter. They didn't care. On that note, after the game, Lincoln Riley was joined by senior linebacker team captain Shane Lee, senior team captain, offensive lineman center Justin Dedich. They were up there for the post-game comments. I'll have more on what Riley said in a little bit later on in the show, but you should probably be aware the only player who spoke next to Riley was Justin, and that was at the very end. And he didn't have a lot to say. You could see the hurt and the pain on his face. He was emotionally spent. People who aren't familiar with it, Justin spent 6 years at USC. I don't think that's how he wanted to go out. But everyone was expecting or anticipating to hear from Caleb Williams, who probably played his final game in a USC uniform. He elected not to talk with the media afterwards. I get it. I thought maybe after last week's loss against Oregon, all that pressure would have been gone. It would have been easier for him to handle the media after this game. Apparently not. And if this was Marshawn Lloyd's last game as a Trojan, I can understand why he would kind of duck out. It was just a bad night overall for the offense. And from the players you needed the most of, those are the players who Caleb Williams, he put up some good numbers offensively. What did he have there? Let me real quickly. 31 for 42, 384 yards, 1 touchdown. That's right. So you got to give a ton of credit to the UCLA defense because in 1 year, the Bruins, under new defensive coordinator, Deanton Lynn, they held the Trojans to 387 total yards of offense and 2 offensive touchdowns, 1 late in the game. It's kind of cosmetic. And another 3 more field goal opportunities, which they only made 2. As a reminder, just to show you the improvement you can make in 1 year by changing your defensive coordinator, Trojan fans. Last year, USC put up over 600 yards of offense. We know the game was close. USC won on the road at the Rose Bowl. But UCLA essentially almost cut that total in half. And you saw the result. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including the pros and the sharks, it's just you. And you're picking more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projections. And when that happens, you can just watch the money kind of roll on into your account. And now with basketball season here, Football season's over, USC fans, almost. Bowl game. You can now pick a combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for a combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, I've used this in the past. I'll throw it out there again. Anthony Davis, forward for the Lakers. And let's combine him with Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver from the Detroit Lions. Let's give him a 15.5 combo of rebounds and receptions. Any combination of those two hooking up to that number, you win. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 hours, 7 days a week streaming channel on YouTube. That's right. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Let's switch over to the defense. Yeah. Whatever incremental improvements USC's defense showed last week on the road at Oregon, they left those improvements on the road in Eugene, Oregon. Dear Lord, and for all that is holy, I'm going to go over a stat right now that is going to blow you away. USC's defense at home against their rival, UCLA, who doesn't particularly have a great offense, and a quarterback that couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if he was standing in front of it from 5 feet away. They allowed the Bruins to convert 13 out of 20 third down opportunities. Are you kidding me? Look, everyone knew coming into the season that USC's defense was going to be a giant question mark. All we wanted was it just to be a little bit better than what they showed in 2022. I think by now everyone knows that did not come to fruition. And my worst fears came true for this game. Now, while Ethan Garbers did not have a John Barnes type of night, he did set a career high with 3 touchdown passes. So, while he did not necessarily turn in a Heisman type of night like the pig farmer, Bryson Barnes from Utah, and he didn't look like a freshman All-American, Fernando Mendoza from Cal, all he did was throw for 155 yards and 3 touchdowns without a turnover. He played smart. And he did that against USC's secondary and their defense in general. Garbers completed 18 out of 31 passes for 155 yards and 3 touchdowns. Excuse me. And again, if he was more accurate, his wide open receivers would have done a lot more damage. I'm telling you, wide open. The score literally was not indicative of how poorly USC's defense played for this game. They were bad. And the fact that UCLA scored 38 points. This is the same UCLA offense that last week at home at the Rose Bowl scored 7 points against Arizona State. Let that sink in. Man. Every now and then, USC's defense, they would step up, they would make a stop. But overall, they were just getting pushed around. And they were getting pushed around just as easily as USC's offensive line was getting pushed around. After the game, on the drive home, and I'm not sure if he was kidding, and I don't think he was, even though he was laughing while he was saying it. My my buddy, my partner over there at wearesc.com, Scott Schrader, he said USC has to start playing more players if they want them in the trenches. Talking about the transfer portal, NIL, recruiting. USC right now, that defensive line, they have improved this year. That's probably the one area you can say, you know what? They made some improvement on defense and it was upfront. Well, there's still there's room for a lot more improvement, and there's room for at least 3 more Bear Alexanders because USC has a big void. Oh, by the way, Jack Sullivan got his first sack of the year. Should have been playing a lot more earlier in the year, but I digress. UCLA, they allowed their quota. USC got their 3 sacks on the game. And they probably could have had more, too. Elijah Hughes, early in the game, he had Ethan Garbers. Freshman kind of let him slip out. And then to add insult to injury, Jamil Muhammad almost had Ethan Garbers down for a sack, or at least a tackle for loss. But right as he was bringing him down into the turf, he was able to get the ball away. T.J. Harden scored one of his 2 touchdowns on that play. Yep, running back from Inglewood. Had a really good night. When he wasn't catching the ball out of the backfield, the rest of the game, 22 rushes, 142 yards, including a long one of 58. Look, we knew USC was going to give up a couple of big plays on defense. They did. You knew that coming in. Overall, UCLA's run game against USC's defense, again, this is where they took a step back. UCLA ran the ball 45 times, 222 yards. USC's tackling was absent upon arrival when this game started. And there just aren't very many good things to say about the defense's results overall. The effort, it was okay. You hate to question the players' effort on the field, but the same mistakes were showing up in Game 12 that we saw in Game 1. And during the week, Lincoln Riley said he wanted to focus all of his efforts, all of his energies onto this game. This is why I want to be in practice. I want to see, how does he coach this team? Why are they not handling the pressure? What goes on behind those locked doors? I don't know. Maybe he'll change his tune next year. Maybe he'll let the media watch. I doubt it, but if you're going to continue to do the same thing and get the same results, that's a sign of insanity. So, look, again, I'm not going to question the effort because I don't think I have the right to do that. These guys are banged up. It's the end of the year. Sometimes you can't tell if they're not playing hard or they're not running hard because they physically can't. One thing I did notice, Mekhi Lemon, he needs to stay on that side of the ball. He needs to play cornerback. He has the right attitude. He's got the perfect personality to play cornerback. And I loved his little tussle fight that he had with Kyle Ford early in the game. I spoke to Ford briefly after the game, and I asked him about that. And we seem to have a difference of opinion of who won that one-on-one battle, but we both agreed that Lemon's future should be at cornerback. And not because he can't play wide receiver, but because he can catch the ball like a wide receiver. And that's huge. So if you've got good hands and you can play defensive back, cornerback, you are like a major hot commodity at the NFL level. So I would do it. It's now time for the Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. How about Brendan Rice, USC's big play wide receiver? The same way Athletic Brewing has changed the non-alcoholic beer game, Brendan Rice has become USC's big play wide receiver in 2023. Against UCLA, he had that 74-yard touchdown. He also had, overall for the game, 8 catches, 147 yards. Brendan Rice always leaves you wanting more. You always want more after you eat rice, right? So And because Athletic Brewing's brews are non-alcoholic, you can enjoy more of them as well. Before, during, or after the game, Athletic Brewing makes non-alcoholic brews that actually taste good. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or you can buy them online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers, you can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off your first online order. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Look, there's a lot to unpack, and this team that started 6-0 just finished their season 7-5. Identical record to UCLA. Does that mean USC and UCLA are on the same level right now? God, I hope not. I would like to think USC is still a step ahead of UCLA. After the season, I don't know. I've written about it over there on wearesc.com. This was a wasted season. I think I might need to reassess that and say this might be a setback season. And I'll get more into that on the next episode of Locked on USC. But for now, if I was to kind of give my Dr. Phil opinion, I think these guys are just mentally exhausted. And when you're playing shorthanded at certain key positions and the pressure to play for a championship combined with a handicap on defense and in some cases on special teams, I think the dam was eventually going to break. It's been springing leaks all season long. I mean, the loss at Notre Dame, it is what it is. Caleb played poorly, 4 turnovers. The defense really never had an opportunity to help the team out. I mean, they can only do so much when they're constantly defending short fields. Then came that loss, that heartbreaker at home against Utah. Again, I think that loss really got stuck in their craw because they could not beat this team on the road, at a neutral site, or even at home. And the two losses, especially the one in Salt Lake City and the one at home in LA, came essentially on the last plays of the game. I think that really got stuck in their head for the rest of the season. And then after Utah, they struggled at Cal. They needed 50 points to win by 1. Think about that. And then they came home and they gave up 52 points to Washington, and they lost by 10. You score 42 points at home and you still lose by 10. And then last week up at Oregon, that game was physical. They laid it out. They laid it all out on the line. And I think once that game was over, the whole team, I think, just took a huge sigh of relief. And they kind of just played against UCLA with that, at least it appeared to me, with a laissez-faire attitude. Let's just get this game over with, get this season over with. I'm not going to say Lincoln Riley hasn't been truthful with the media or the fans following the games, but his first comment after the game tonight sounded like the first time he was being honest with himself. Very, very disappointed. No other way to put it. I told the guys in the locker room, I've clearly not done a good enough job here in the second half of the season getting this team ready to go. Look, there's really nothing left to say after that because that's the bottom line. The buck stops with the head coach. The final 6 games of the season, USC went 1-5. I mean, who knew? Again, Scott loves to drop these little dimes on me, but who knew that USC's signature win of the season would be a triple overtime nail biter win at home over Arizona? That was supposed to be a trap game for USC. And I think everybody should send Arizona's head coach, Jed Fish, a Christmas or a Hanukkah card because he decided not to go for 2 points, what he probably should have. Oh, and then USC is probably sitting 6-6. So got that going for you, USC fans. I was going to read the rest of Riley's opening statement, but it was a lot of filibustering. I'm going to save it for Monday's episode. It was semi-long, and again, he said the loss to UCLA reminded him a lot of the game against Notre Dame, and he was reflecting or referring to the turnovers. Yeah, USC's turnovers did them in. Like I said, I'll save that for Monday. But this game should remind him of the Notre Dame game, because USC's two biggest rivals kicked USC's butt the hardest in 2023. And it wasn't pretty. He was asked, he was also asked after the game what he could have done better down the back half of the season, the final 6 games. Again, nice, honest answer. Everything. I don't know if it's more. I don't know if I could have put in more minutes than what I did, but it's performance-based at the end of the day. So I'm not going to dig my Spurs in too deeply right now. I got to decompress a little bit more. But again, I said at the top of the show, utterly uninspiring, utterly unprepared. And this team was just very disappointing. You start out 6-0, you finish off 7-5. And now you just sit around, you wait for whatever bowl game you're qualified for. You got that. And you hope that Lincoln Riley's effort finding a defensive coordinator works out a little bit better than his effort getting this team prepared for UCLA. Because during the week, that's what he said he wanted to do. He wanted to focus all of his energies and all of his efforts on this game. If that's his energies and efforts focused on one game, yeah. For all of you who are listening to this, I just made a bitter beer face. I don't know what's going to happen. So, all right. That's it for this post-game reaction. I'll be back for another episode of Locked on USC tomorrow, because that's what we do. Actually, it'll be on Monday, because you're probably watching this on Saturday or Sunday. So until that next episode of Locked on USC, everyone, you know what to do.